Hey guys and girls, welcome back to Friday Night TCG Talk. I am Poketing King and I am joined by Thomas, aka pokemonster 363. You might have seen some of his content on YouTube or in Instagram. He's been part of the community for a while, and over the last sort of 12 months and stuff, been making content that we've seen some huge views on there, but we'll talk about that later in the video. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Pokemon and the next 12 months of releases. Obviously, Pokemon release stuff quite ahead and they tease us with little bits here and there. Now, what are you most excited about that we've seen so far announced?
Does it have to include actual cards being revealed? Because
No,
if
it can just be just the idea, anything that they've kind of, leaked or anything.
I think it's going to be a basic take, but the glory of Team Rocket obviously
Yeah.
is the biggest one. Now there's a question mark as to whether that's going to be in the next 12 months or not. I think it will.
Yeah.
People originally thought that was going to come out in January, but that's going to be Battle Partners instead. So there hasn't been a release date for Glory of Team Rocket, but the teaser that they did at the end of the World Championships, where they got the Rocket logo and the Mewtwo going over it, I think was just perfect to tease it.
Yeah.
So probably highest on my list.
Yeah.
But in general, I'm pretty excited for most of the sets that we know are coming out. So like even Paradise Dragona, I've got a few boxes pre-ordered already to open. Surging Sparks in English, so Supercharged Breaker in Japanese. It looks pretty good from the pack art, so it just confirms there's going to be a Terra Pikachu.
Yeah.
And then obviously you've got Terrestrial Festival, so we're in the home stretch of the Scarlet and Violet era, or like towards the second half, and it looks like it's heating up a bit. So pretty excited about most. Battle Partners looks okay. I was never that much of a trainers Pokemon person, so it looks cool, and that end Reshiram looks cool, but it also just looks like a standard illustration rare. So hopefully they have some nice textured cards. But Glory of Team Rocket is top of my list. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I think the Team Rocket, whatever we see that the Team Rocket is that they've leaked is going to be exciting. I think the hype is huge. We've not really seen much over, the sort of journey of Pokemon where they leak something so far in advance, but it's kind of left people hanging. I think that is probably definitely a smart thing to do. I think people are hugely excited. Team Rocket has been since the EX Team Rocket return, so 20 years now since we've had Rocket cards and stuff, and having Dark Pokemon is exciting. Obviously, we saw the Mewtwo as well, which is just even more hype. So that probably is number one. I think the English set with they've just announced with the Pikachu and stuff. The Magneton promo looks really cool. That's coming in the ETB, which is pretty sick. I think people were expecting the Pikachu, but they're going to keep that for the set, which it makes sense to have that as a chase.
Or maybe sorry to cut you off. Maybe because all the ETB promos are always like AR illustration rares, so maybe they don't actually have a Pikachu illustration rare because maybe it's just full. But anyways, keep going.
It could be, yeah. I think with these kind of things, it makes sense not to have one of the chases. The ETB promos are nice anyway, and the set looks good. There's a Quagsire promo, obviously, that's from like the gym sets, the gym promo packs. We've got Zapdos as well, which is cool. So I'm looking forward to that. I think the battle part stuff I am actually quite, because I enjoyed the gym sets. I enjoyed the Platinum era sets where you had like the Elite Four and stuff. And we've had like little bits here and there. But that's again another sort of favorite of people's in Pokemon. I think, that they've got such a huge catalog. And I talked about this on a recent video of somebody else. And they've got such a huge catalog that they can go back to constantly. And this is one of the big reasons why Pokemon do so well and why they are the number one TCG, and why I'm fully confident that there isn't a game that will knock them off, just because they might have generations that maybe not so much popular and people don't love them so much there and then, but they'll always bring out, that middle to the end part of every TCG set where they'll just go, right, let's bring this back, let's bring that back, and people love it. And I think Scarlet and Violet era as a whole so far, I've really enjoyed. Even the early sets that at some point, I think at some point, people just started realizing actually how good they are. When they first came out, the Scarlet and Violet base, Paldea Evolved, Obsidian Flame stuff, I don't think people loved them. But I think now, talking to people now, I think they realize actually they are really nice sets compared to, say, like Sun and Moon base, or you look at sets like Black and White base where you've got 2 full arts, you've got Emerging Powers, when you've got the Thunderous and Tornadus, and in the past we've had such weak base sets. And although Scarlet and Violet isn't amazing, it's still a solid set. We've still got these illustration art rares that they're continuing through every generation now, which just go down really well. But yeah, Pokemon, as always, they absolutely smash it out the park. They must look at other TCGs and go, right, One Piece is doing this, Lorcana's doing that, Star Wars doing this, and they're just like, look, with a press of a button, we can release something that will absolutely destroy that. So yeah, I'm excited to see what the Rocket thing is. Is it going to be a full set, or is it going to be a holiday set, or is it going to be a subset in set? If they do something like EX Team Rocket Returns, I don't know. Maybe they bring Gold Stars back. That would be special, because I think Team Rocket Returns was one of the first sets. It is the first set that. So was it the English release? It was 2020. It was 2005, wasn't it, or 2004?
One of those two. I wouldn't know. I think 2004, just based on. I'm just remembering the copyright information on the bottom.
Yeah.
I think 2004. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because Legend Maker was 2005, so yeah, probably 2004. So which surprised me they're not doing 20 years now, but they're going to leave that for next year. They're going to let it cook over the next few months, maybe release a few things here and there. If they brought back how do you think it would be taken if they went, do you know what, we're bringing Gold Stars back and they're doing the free starters again? Do you think that would pop off?
I think it depends on what they look like. I mean, I would love them to make some sort of cards that have a reference to them. I mean, my profile picture before I changed it is the Gold Star Torchic. So I really love the Team Rocket Returns Gold Stars. But just trying to think about how they would fit it into Modern. Would it be like a full art, shiny SAR illustration? That would be cool. But also the question is, would they do it just for this set or the other sets after? I don't think they would do it for sets afterwards.
Yeah, it could be a one-off.
Because it sounds like we're going to then move into Legends Set 8 territory, Mega Evolutions and stuff. So I just don't think... Well, actually, some of the Mega Evolutions are the Ho-End starters, so I don't know. But I'd be excited for it. But has to be done by Fukuda, because all the Gold Stars are drawn by him. The Greninja was not that good looking, no offense to him.
No, I agree. I love Greninja, but that card itself didn't really fit with the rest of them.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting. I'd like it to keep the continuity of what the original Gold Stars were. So sort of drawn by the same artist, shiny.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think about it. What about you?
Yeah, I think probably if they did like an art illustration rare, and he did, I don't know if, I don't know what the headspace is of Pokemon right now, but if they did like them as shiny, but like a really nice like illustration rare, and it had like an homage to Team Rocket, I think that would be quite cool. But and if they did just that set, that to me would be like, as a collector, that would be a case of like, at any point in the future they could release a set that has that could do an homage to other Gold Stars, for instance. Maybe we have the Rayquaza and the Latios and Latios, or any of them, the Mew Gold Star, the Pikachu. yeah, it would be interesting. I think EX era is it's such an interesting era because people enjoy it, but there's not many people that have the same nostalgia for it that didn't collect during the EX era. So it's kind of just like I wouldn't say it's a forgotten era, but I do think it's a slept on era, and I don't like saying things are undervalued or slept on, but I think when you look at like the reverse hollows that we had in the EX era, which are just ridiculous, I think they would definitely. I'd like to see them bring them back. But I think just the magic of it, the whole EX era, just the way, it was their Pokemon's first time doing the cards themselves. It was their first generation that it wasn't Wizard of the Coast. And I think they experimented a lot through the eras, going into Delta Species, which is, again, another huge fan favorite. If they properly brought that back, maybe did a Delta Species set in the future. And as we're just talking, right now, that's, again, another idea that, people are, when people say, oh, but, they've got to run out of the ideas. The beauty is they've got, such a track record of such amazing ideas that at any point in the future that, they can bring those back.
Yeah, I think they do a good job. I think they do a good job of, in some ways, not going back too much. But when they do, it does feel like it's always like Gen 1 stuff. So like every time they got a new gimmick, like Terra stuff, it's Charizard that's like sort of the figurehead.
Yeah.
When they did the Gigantamax, it was Pikachu and Charizard when they did the Mega Evolutions. But in terms of Pokemon sets, they do milk Charizard quite a lot, but I don't think that they overdo it in terms of always going back to like other sets or like things that people love. So
yeah, there's the potential is there. It's absolutely huge. So I want to talk to you about the state of the Japanese market right now, and we've obviously seen, over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, massive, huge retrace on a lot of Japanese, whether it's modern or mid-era. You're seeing, EXs and level Xs and PSA 10 for like 50 quid, As a collector of Japanese, I've had this conversation with Max about a million times, and
yeah.
as I'm sure you probably have as well. What do you make of it? Why do you think this has happened?
Why do you think it's happened? Well, it's crazy to think how high it went in such a short space of time. And I don't know, so like towards the end of last year or like the second half of last year, in like June or July, like a lot of the Sword and Shield alt arts tag team cards were like 2xing, 3xing in the space of 2-3 days. A lot of that I don't want to put blame on them, but a lot of that was linked to Japanese card store buy lists. And for whatever reason, there were a lot of sales from like friends of ours on Instagram selling from the UK, but those cards being bought up either in China or Japan. So a lot of the alt arts went up. A lot of the waifus went to waifu in quotation marks because I don't endorse obviously the link between underage girls and being wives. Went up to crazy prices. So I don't know if it's just how fast it went up and people maybe over leveraging themselves to get into it, thinking that I would keep going up. That led to the crash. But if you look at the population reports as well for a lot of those cards that went up, they're massive. I mean the Iono SAR, because Clayburst came out just before this all happened, but Scarlet and Violet Japanese was still extremely hype at the moment. I mean, we were seeing people in Japan like fighting each other in queues for the Pokemon Center to get their hands on Clayburst boxes, which is something I never thought would happen. You look at the population report on the Iono SAR now from Clayburst, it's like 13K or something like that.
Yeah.
So the stores played a part in it, but I think that in the general cycle of things, people are always looking for the next thing that's hype. Like they always have to have it in their head. You can never live in a state where just things are normal. Like people are always looking for something. So recently with English, I've kind of seen that with like illustration rares or things like that, which are the next big hype. And I think at that period in time, when it was Japanese Pokemon cards, personally, I do believe that they deserve that value in some way because I always prioritized the look of the card and the quality of the card over being able to read the language and having yellow borders for Sword and Shield. But it might just be that after a while, people sort of fell out of that, and now it looks like a lot of English cards are back on the rise. So since EV Heroes, I would say up until June 2023, Japanese cards took over in terms of prices. Because before that, I hadn't really seen chase Japanese cards being worth more than English cards. You still got some Japanese cards being worth more than English now, but I think it's getting lower. And in the SV era with illustration rares, and now with the harder to pull special illustration rares in temporal forces, it looks like English cards are back on the up. So it might just be a cycle. I mean, I do think, personally, biased opinion, that they do deserve to be worth more, but that's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I think living through it was definitely interesting. I think as somebody who collected Japanese primarily for over a decade, I remember EV Heroes. I remember getting an email saying all my orders were cancelled and that I was getting nothing. And so I think I had. So I used Card Journeys for a lot of it.
Oh, okay.
So Brian in Hong Kong, he was pretty much.
Met up with him recently.
One of my. Pardon?
Did you meet up with him recently?
Yeah. I met up with him. He's a great guy. I had some ordered with, I think, Plaza Japan and Nin Game as well. So I had from 3 different sources, but at the time, I had never had an issue ever getting Japanese. All the way back to Diamond and Pearl era, it was never a case of like, I never had to worry it. It was, I order this, I will get this. That's that. And obviously the hype, everything was going on, stuff started going mental, and obviously I got all my stuff cancelled. I had ordered tons for other people as well, because by that point I was ordering cases from Japan, and basically selling them at cost to people over here. So I had tons of, you know, people relying on me as well, and it did feel bad to disappoint people, because it was a case of like, I'm literally getting none. So I basically quit collecting Japanese then. I was like, I'm done now.
Okay, yeah.
And that was kind of a great time of me moving more into Flesh and Blood as well at the time. And it was a shame. And then I remember, you know, stuff just kept going mental, seeing people paying £100 for a box. Obviously, you're seeing fights and queues in Japan, and, you know, them not selling boxes, then cutting the seal out. And then I remember it was around the time that the primes went mental. I remember I was at London Card Show, and it was when we were hearing, you know, the Mew Prime selling in a 10 for 5k and the Absol going mad. And I remember bumping in. Yeah, I remember bumping into Max, and he turned up, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you were coming." And he was like, "Yeah, someone DM'd me, a Chinese buyer," and it went mad. And, you know, since then I sort of looked into it more and spoke to a lot of people over in Japan, and a lot of it, you know, that kind of thing was China, and how there was a big buyer in China that was basically trying to inflate the prices and use his position as a respected large member of the community. And people were like, oh, well, if he's got all these cards and he's putting all this money into it, it must be good. And then we had this huge influx of every sale I had on eBay was going to China. Every single one of them. The amount of people that were reaching to me and they were like, have you got this? Have you got that? And, you know, there was no back and forth on price. It was, I want this, cool. And it was like, okay. So, you know, and we've all benefited from that. I'm sure all of us sold some things in that ridiculous, you know, hype train that we had. And it's nice to see Japanese back to the point where people can afford to buy boxes. You know, the card quality is still the best. I still love Japanese, and I'm back to collecting Japanese again now, which is great. But it was definitely an interesting cycle to see people going from, well, I can't read the cards, so why would I want to collect it, to everybody just wanting Japanese and they don't want English. So yeah, I think a lot of the cards are probably undervalued at this point.
They are
compared to their English values. when you look at a lot of the alt arts from Sword and Shield, and you look at the populations of them, the English versus Japanese. It, but that's what people want right now. They want the English, which makes sense. But it's good time to be collecting Japanese.
Sure.
Yeah. So I've sort of been picking up a lot myself again, which has been great. I'm currently negotiating a PSA 8 Japanese Pikachu Gold Star, so hopefully by the end of this call we'll have that deal sorted. But yeah, so is there anything that what are you collecting? What are you going for right now?
So I just finished, in quotation marks, all the Sword and Shield alt arts in Japanese. I'm technically missing 3. T has got them though, so it's the summer lottery promos for the Evolution VMAXs.
Oh yeah.
I don't have those, but they seem to be coming down in price, so I'm thinking about them. But in my head, Sword and Shield is complete. In terms of my collection goals, I want to collect all of the chase cards from all of the generations. So Sword and Shield alt arts, SV, SARs. I'm including trainer cards now because they're more affordable. So I should be picking up SARs at the moment, but I'm opening a lot as well because it's so cheap and happen to be pulling them. And now I'm moving back to Sun and Moon Tag Team alt arts because they're pretty much dirt cheap now compared to what they were. I also want to do the XY UR cards, but mainly the gold alt arts. So the Alakazam, the Gyarados, Gardevoir, the 2 Mewtwo, and the Volcanion. Those are on my list. Then the black and white URs. But in terms of what I'm doing right now, I just picked up a Sun and Moon Japanese alt art. I'm buying another one tonight.
Okay.
And then in terms of sealed, I'm also going backwards to Sun and Moon. Because there are a few sets in Sun and Moon Japanese where I don't have a single box. And I've sort of been... So I like to complete the entire generation because it's just nice. With Sun and Moon, I got close to a third or halfway, and then I gave up because the boxes went up too much. Since these singles have crashed, the box prices have still stayed pretty good, actually, but it's just easier to buy them now. So I'm slowly gonna try to pick those up as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's a long list of things that you're trying to get. I think that's the bad part, I guess, of collecting is you'll always find something else to collect. You finish one goal, and then there's always something else. But as I said, Japanese, it's a better time to buy. One of the interesting things that I find is the amount of a lot of these big streamers that are going over to Japan now very regularly, like every couple of months. They are buying sheer amounts. I've spoken to a few of them, and they've said that they've got pretty good partnerships with stores over there now, to the point where stuff will come in, they'll let them know, they'll keep it aside, and it doesn't hit the shop floor. Which is, I mean, if you're gonna do it, that is the way to go. So, in that sense, Japanese singles are hugely popular, especially on things like Whatnot and stuff. Whenever I go on there, it's always 20,000, pounds worth of Japanese gold stars and shinings and all these, rare stuff. And for me, it kind of begs the question of because I when I went to Japan, I struggled to find very much. And speaking to people that aren't doing that go over there now, are saying that they're struggling to find sort of near mint condition, anything that isn't Sword and Shield now, Sword and Shield and Scarlet Violet. Do you think we're going to have a problem where the supply is just going to completely dry up in Japan?
I think we'll have to wait and see. But I went to Japan in December 2022, and already by that point, all I could find was mainly Sword and Shield stuff.
Yeah.
There was some vintage stuff in shops like Maji and stuff, but never in good condition. Or if it was in good condition, I feel like the way I remembered it was more expensive than what I would be able to get it for in the UK. Now, Maji is, for people watching who might not know, is probably the most tourist-friendly or Westerner-friendly shop. So it might have higher prices than other shops I've looked at. But I think you're right. There's a huge quantity of Japanese old school vintage singles that are being brought over from Japan to the UK, and it's, the UK is not even going to be the number one foreign consuming country if you think about the US. So whatever the UK is doing, the US is going to be doing with that from Japan like 5 times, 10 times. So if I take into account the US, then maybe yes. And the last thing I noted, and this is not an insult to Japanese people, I actually feel like in the West, or I don't know about China. I am Chinese, but I don't know about China. But like, I always feel like in Japan, you always see like these vintage cards in like poor condition binders. They're not like zipped binders like us.
Yeah.
When you go to shops, like they rarely have like top loaders, or they're always like side loading top loaders. So I don't know if they have a culture to the same degree as us in terms of protecting the cards, and maybe that is going to affect how much is left out there. But
Yeah.
all of this is just speculation because it's just impossible to think about. I mean, there must be so many people that still have cards hidden away
Yeah.
somewhere in Japan.
Yeah, I think I'm planning on a trip next year, so I'm interested to look and see what I can find. I think when I went in just after you, I think so. I went in January 2023 because I think when you went, that Japan had just opened.
Yeah.
So they were still having masks were still compulsory while I went, and I remember the amount of looks that I was getting because some of the places that I was going to that wasn't like tourist locations, they hadn't seen many tourists for a few years now because of the pandemic. So it was quite interesting, and I was trying so many different places myself, and as you just said, it was still cheaper to get over in the UK than it was to get over there. I think the prices were so high, but yeah, I think I can't see a place in the future. It might be a few years now where finding anything that is like old back to even XY, finding those in near mint to mint condition will be quite easy. I think it's going to get increasingly harder as more stuff, because I can't imagine the Japanese market is then people aren't coming over to the UK and then buying all the Japanese stuff and bringing it back. It's a case of, I think, just as time goes on, the US, the UK, and probably other parts of the world are slowly, basically taking all the supply. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years. Do you think that Pokemon centers will go back to selling sealed boxes?
Like fully sealed?
Yeah, fully sealed.
That's a good question. Because I think that sometimes the way the Pokemon company acts isn't necessarily like, they take a long time to change things. So
yeah,
the reason why they cut the seals in the first place was to stop reselling. Now it looks like the reselling has gone down a lot, but I don't know if they'll want to do something that could bring it back up again, or
yeah,
I don't know if they will react fast enough to bring it back up again. I think if people in Japan aren't complaining about buying boxes unsealed, then they'll just keep them that way.
yeah,
There are to be honest though, like I do feel like it feels like it's really difficult to get sealed product if you're a Japanese person in Japan, even though it's so easy now if you live outside of Japan. But I use Amazon Japan to buy sealed booster
same,
boxes.
yeah,
I imagine that they could do the same to
yeah,
get them sealed, and also the prices are now below retail. So Pokemon centers, I don't know is the answer. I mean, they're stocking a lot now. If
yeah,
we switch over to One Piece, for example, in the UK, they changed that very quickly. So like
yeah,
they implemented a strategy where for like 6, 7, 8 months, maybe I'm getting it wrong, they were cutting the seal. And now that it's cooled off, they've started selling sealed boxes again. But for
yeah,
Pokemon in Japan, it's hard to say because I've wanted them to address the whole resealing problem, which they took ages to do, and it's still not working. So like I'm going off on a tangent, but when 151 was out, people were selling on Mercari just like flattened boxes for money. That was
yeah.
just very disturbing to watch, and they still haven't changed to move that, even though that's a huge problem. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think I still don't understand why we haven't got a proper wrapper for the Japanese boxes, like a Pokeball wrapper. Like,
Yeah,
why
they
are we
do it
still getting?
Chinese now.
Yeah, yeah. It makes zero sense because they obviously introduced this rip seal, which didn't do anything because people can just put their hands to the side of the boxes. And we've seen, stores like Japan to UK over here where people bought EV Heroes and 151 from and they've been resealed because they bought from random, suppliers or whatever in Japan. I know that, there's the whole supply chain at one point was, unsafe and untrustworthy. But yeah, it's interesting why Pokemon haven't. As you said, they take ages. It's all run by old Japanese men, and they're stubborn. They don't want to change anything. This has worked for so long. This is what we're gonna do, and I can't. I would like to have been in Pokemon when they decided to go right. Pokemon Centers, we're going to stop selling sealed product because that was something people were crying out for. And even now, I think a lot of like 7-Elevens and stuff. Some of them won't give you the box; they'll just sell you the packs.
Yeah,
Um,
they have
which
packed them
is
as well.
yeah, which is I mean, it's better than it is. Speaking to people that live in Japan that basically quit Pokemon because they felt that the way they were being treated by the Pokemon company in terms of all the supplies somehow was still going international, but there was nothing inside Japan for them. So I understand. Obviously, it's the intention for Japanese product is for the Japanese market,
Mm.
and I think it just people took advantage of it elsewhere. But we're getting there. You can actually buy product now. So we'll move on to One Piece because you mentioned it briefly. Obviously, One Piece is just, we've had OPO 9 announced and it's going to have the 4 manga rares as well as the gold manga rare, which looks mental. Then we've got Wanted cards as well. How do you think One Piece is doing now compared to, say, 6-7 months ago when, you couldn't find any product whatsoever?
It's still such a new game, so it's going to be interesting to see how it goes from here. I'm very excited for OPO 9. It's like the first time I've been excited for like this excited for a while. I'm almost more excited for this than OP05 because I think they have more cards and sets of cards that I want to collect.
Yeah,
They've got spoiler alert, but they've just got like the 4 emperors, but like in different formats. So as you've said,
yeah,
they've got the wanted SP posters, and then they've got the manga rares. They've also got alt arts for those and alt leaders for those, which are like slightly different arts. So that's going to be great. In terms of where the TCG is, I don't play the game, so I can't comment. But it's certainly the hype has gone down a lot. So I make videos where I'm still opening One Piece booster
yeah,
box and just using that as a measure. The views I'm getting are way way lower than what I was getting in like January time.
yeah,
I think for the health of the game, it's a good thing because in the January time, a huge portion of the people that were in like getting into it probably had zero interest in it. So
yeah,
what you've got left is people that are still interested in it, and you can actually get boxes again sealed now in the English game. So I'm very excited for '09. I'm still not sure what they're going to do after. If I look at what's just come out, PRB '01, so much drama over it, and people saying Bandai were killing their own game, and then it turns out actually the manga rare God pack is extremely hard to pull. But I don't think that set was that good, apart from the potential to pull the manga rares.
yeah.
They tried to do a high class set in the same way as Pokemon, but it just doesn't hit the same way as Pokemon
No,
because you don't care about collecting every single alt art in the set. Whereas when Pokemon does it, if I just exclude shiny treasures for a second, it makes you want to collect all of it basically. So I think it's in a decent place. '09 looks very good, but interesting to see where it'll go afterwards.
yeah, yeah. I think I I actually barely opened any One Piece. I still play every week at my locals, but I don't actually collect the game anymore. and I don't make as much content on it as I was do. I noticed that, you know, the popularity of some of the openings and stuff. Obviously, I stopped being able to get product from distro because, you know, my distro were like, we're not doing One Piece anymore, so it's only Asmodee that can get it now. Yeah, I use Bliss and they stopped. So I got OPO 6 was the last set I got, and I ordered 8 cases and I got 2 boxes. So my orders went up from like OPO 4, OPO 5 to OPO 6 and stuff, and like EBO 1, even that I barely got any. So, and they were just like, right, we're not gonna do, you know, One Piece anymore because the amount that we're getting is just non-existent. Obviously, the amount of accounts that were jumping on to One Piece and stuff, because it was the hot TCG, you know, when you're selling modern Pokemon as a store, there's no profit in it. You know, the profit margins are non-existent. So, you know, One Piece was doing very well. There was good profit margins. So I think, you know, when I was streaming on, you know, on Whatnot and stuff and YouTube and doing box breaks and collecting it myself, I was really sort of, you know, really excited about collecting them when sets came out. And now, you know, I actually only just play, and I still love the game. I really enjoy it. And OPO 9 looks really good. I didn't open anything of PBR 1. The God Pack obviously is amazing. I don't think we're not gonna get that in English. They'll probably just do
Agreed.
they'll do some treasure rare. There'll be some rubbish treasure rare that no one cares about. But yeah, I think it would appear that they, as you said, they've tried to copy Pokemon Japan's like high class sets, and you know, having the existence of a God Pack as well, because that works for Japanese Pokemon sets. The high class set is an exciting time, and it just didn't hit the same way. Maybe in years to come, I think One Piece is still way too young to be doing stuff like that. Especially, you know, when a lot of Japanese One Piece products are still, you know, even the older sets are still easy to pick up. They're a lot cheaper than they ever were here. So having reprints of these other cards, like, I know the defense was from a player's point of view, but I don't think it really solved. There was not an issue for it to solve in Japan. Now, in English, that makes sense to a degree that we're going to get some reprints, but obviously we had the, you know, the restocks and reprints at the Bandai stores and other stores as well for OPO 1 and OPO 2. I know that they were limited, you know, to 1 or 2 box or whatever it was in the UK, but I know from pop-up events in America that I spoke to people and they were like, oh, I've just picked up 60 boxes of OPO 1. And I'm like, oh, was there not like a cap or anything? They're like, oh, no, you just buy whatever you want. And I was like, well, surely they're going to run out. And he was like, no, they said they've basically got unlimited. And I was like, from what I heard, that stores were going to get like a max of 2 if you were gold, like gold status, because they do bronze, silver, and gold with stores for Bandai. And, you know, at these pop-up events in the US, you know, a Bandai store opened up in the back of a Kmart, which a friend of mine was walking through Kmart, you know, which is, you know, for those that don't know, it's a big like Korean supermarket in America, and then there's just a Bandai store there, just randomly popped up. So it's, yeah, imagine going to Asda or Tesco's and there's just a Bandai store in the back, like,
That'd be
just
sick.
chilling next to the phone shop. They got a phone shop, the bakery, and then a Bandai store.
All specials.
That would be, yeah, that would be cool. But from speaking to people, obviously the Camden store is very popular still. Every time I go to the Brighton store, there's never anyone in there. And from what I've heard of the Old Trafford store, the one up north, again, they, you know, people spoke to the staff and they say apart from the nights that they do events, it's not very busy anymore. So I think that's not a bad thing, because, you know, it did go to stupid levels. It really did. It was not sustainable at the level it was going. But now we're kind of at a healthier place where people can actually buy product. We've had a huge influx of new players at my locals now. We've got like 16 to 18 players, which is mad. You know, some weeks we couldn't fire because we didn't have 4 people. But product being available suddenly has brought people in, which is great. And we've got the pre-release for OPO 8 next month as well. So, you know, it's exciting times. So I want to kind of move on to the content side of it and kind of how you got into making content, because I remember when we first, started speaking and stuff, you weren't making content, and now, you've been smashing it. The waifu video has got 7.8 thousand views, which is absolutely mental. So, talk us through it all.
Well, I've had my Instagram account for a while, like since 2018, where I've been posting cards, and I've been since 2019 back into collecting Pokemon. So I do all the things that you see people do on YouTube in terms of like what most people who are collecting do. They buy product, they get it in, they open it, or they buy singles and they grade them for their personal collection. And in the last few years, I've started to do that more and more. So in my head, I was just like, as a way to justify myself opening this box, I should just put a camera in front of it and do what I'm usually doing without changing it. Now, obviously, doing the content now is also influencing what I'm doing. Like, you can never be like, I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing before and just put a camera in front of it. But that's how I sort of got into it. Like my first video, I think, was just an opening. Like I started out doing a lot of openings, and now I'm doing more like analysis videos. But I still do openings. My opening videos don't do as well, but I think that's because you just have to be first to it all the time. And that concentrates most of the views. But yeah, the main reason why I wanted to do it was I just wanted to test it out and put a camera in front of what I was already doing. Now I've started to do a bit more than that, but yeah, I love it, so I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah, it's great to see. I think that is the natural progression for a lot of people, is doing openings. And I had a similar thing for you when I was, but I was doing openings when I was like 12 on YouTube, and it was very blurry videos. The content wasn't great at all. And then it became of like, well, if I buy this more expensive box, but if I open it for YouTube, it's fine, right? Like, gaslighting myself into, and as you just said, it never is the same, because then you're like, right, well, I could buy this box, I can't, but if I open it, then it's content, right? And then it naturally progresses to obviously the content that you're doing now, where you're talking in front of the camera. That was something that, I want to talk about. So going from being behind the camera, filming openings and stuff, moving to being in front of the camera. Now, that for me was a case of, I remember my first video in front of the camera, and I had recorded it, and for weeks I didn't want to post it. And I remember speaking to Mike at the time, and he was like, look, just put it out there. And I was so nervous. I was so a case of like, what if people don't like this, or what if people don't like that? And he was like, look, just put it out, see what happens. And then, since then, pretty much 95% of my content is in front of the camera. How did that transition and how did that process feel for you, being in front of the camera?
I think the first thing for me when I started doing YouTube is I didn't want to spend too much money on equipment. So I still make my videos mainly using my phone, because I think the phone has a great camera, and the mic on my phone is better than the Blue Yeti mic that I got, actually. So for me, I did have a shyness to being on camera. Like in my head, I was never going to be on camera, basically. But then at some point, after talking to people, like it does make you more personable to your audience. And it is sort of like challenging yourself, putting yourself out there. So I thought about it, I think, in a different way to you. So I didn't record one and then sit on it for weeks. I sat on it for weeks or months, and then I recorded it and posted it, if that makes sense. So I was thinking about it in my head for a very long time, and then just decided to get a webcam, and that's when I started doing it. So I think I was still a bit worried about it, but after thinking about it for a while and buying the camera, I just did it. And I can't even remember what my first one is now, just because I'm so used to it now.
So it becomes so natural.
it's just an analysis paralysis is what they say, which is
Yeah.
like you can get so stuck up in your head thinking about things and not doing it. And sometimes, like Mike said, sometimes you just need to do it and put it out there, right?
Yeah, and the content that you've made now is obviously doing really well, and you'll find that less the people are watching the openings, because the way that the YouTube algorithm works, it kind of, not just for the interest, obviously you have to get the video out as soon as a set releases. You don't always have the time for that, but I think it naturally pushes your content to people that are more likely gonna watch, you in front of the camera, talking about your opinions, maybe talking about the market, talking about discussions and analysis, versus, just opening. And that kind of moved to the point where I just barely open stuff on camera anymore. Just because, I'll do an opening and it'll get like 40 views, but then, and I'm just like, okay, it's not about the views, fair enough, but was I going to open that anyway? Or am I just going to open it for 40 views? So, and now I barely open anything unless I'm doing a stream, because I just don't have the interest in opening it as much now.
Interesting. It's different for
Yeah.
me because I still open every set that comes out because I want to pull the
Yeah.
SLRs basically. So I've still got an interest in it, but maybe the way I do it is I've been experimenting pushing it out in different ways now. So like sometimes now when I'm opening for the first time, I still do a long form video. But
Yeah.
then afterwards, when I'm like degenning and just opening it to try and pull something, like a few days after, I'll just put the camera in portrait mode and just open it without talking. And that's
Yeah.
just catch it in case I get something good. And then I just put
Yeah.
it in YouTube short. Then you can
Yeah.
replicate that for like TikTok and Instagram. Works
Yeah.
pretty well, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think for me as well, I think naturally moving into a business, I can't really justify opening as much anymore, because it's not, the collector in me. I wouldn't say the collector in me still exists, but every purchase I make now, it's a case of I can open up a load of boxes or I can buy a card for my personal collection, but I can't do both.
That
So
makes sense.
it's which it sort of makes sense. So we're gonna kind of be at the end of this now, and I want to ask for a hot take off you. Have you got a spicy one? Have you got a hot take for us?
I have one in my head, but I was trying to see if I could think of a better one. So maybe you go first, and then if I can't think of a better one, I'll go with the one I've got.
So something that I've brought up before on videos is whether something is actually truly undervalued or it is just appropriately priced for the conditions and the kind of cap of the market as such. So when we talk about a lot of like the EXs and level Xs and tens being so cheap in Japanese, I think the first thing when you look at, because you have price memory, right? You've seen the prices that were at the highs and you think, well, that is kind of, in my head, that's the cap of it, right? Potentially. And it happened once, so potentially could happen again. But when you see a card that goes from being 50 quid to 400, then back down to 50, you naturally think, well, sort of, why has that happened? Is it just people have lost interest? And that mid era for Japanese is probably the least popular, because not many people were collecting for mid era in general. That's when a lot of people grew up and kind of lost interest in Pokemon, and they came back later, maybe in XY or further on. I think a lot of the stuff that is priced that it is now in Japanese is appropriately priced. I don't think it's undervalued. I think it's priced based on the demand, and I don't think some of those cards will ever hit the highs that they had before. I don't think all of the level X's and all the EXs are going to be hundreds and hundreds. I think a lot of those cards are going to be sat at those prices for very, very many years, because they don't have the same nostalgia for those cards as they do for the earlier generations or the later generations. So I can see long term Sword and Shield late era and Scarlet Fire outperforming consistently that whole block of stuff. That's that's my thoughts.
Cool. I had a few running around in my head. I'm just wondering which one is the least controversial or like the middle controversial one. Okay, I mean, I don't know if this is a hot take, but my personal opinion when I see things that are happening in the community is I feel like people don't care enough about some things sometimes. So specifically talking about resealing of Pokemon products, like modern Japanese Pokemon products, and card altering, so people trimming cards or polishing cards.
Yeah.
That those are things that have reduced my confidence in who I buy from greatly. And I feel
Yeah.
like it should for other people, even now with modern Japanese sealed.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I've seen a Raging Surf booster box being resealed before. So in my head, these are things that should affect prices, but I feel like people are ignoring them because it hasn't hit them yet. But I do think
Yeah.
that people should maybe care about it more, because I definitely like I don't buy sealed stuff from random people anymore nowadays. But
Yeah.
I still see a lot of people doing that without really doing their due diligence, even though I feel like it should be impacting prices. So
Okay, that makes sense. I think it really puts it in perspective when you see the whole community rally against people like Poker Chloe and stuff for selling Staff World promos, but no one's talking about people that are altering cards, and there are big members of the community now that are selling products that alter the cards, and you've got stores that have been called out for selling resealed items, and it just nothing happens. No one says a thing. There's no videos about that. There's no videos being made by a possum or rattle about that, but they'll get so, emotionally attached to the price of cards that people are selling.
yeah, sometimes that was going to be one of my hot takes.
Go
Sometimes
on.
I don't think people think deep enough about something to warrant the way that they react. So
Yeah.
people react very angrily because they see a high price, but people think that that high price is achieved because of the price that someone bought it for, i.e., that story that I saw in the video intimating that that person had bought them for £100 each,
Yeah.
completely unconfirmed news.
Yeah.
That's what kickstarts the train, and people go off that. So I think people
Yeah.
should just think a bit more deeply about those things. And also, even if you are against that practice, even though I would say again, it goes back to like entitlement. Like, is that something that people are? Is a staff promo something that the general public is entitled to? Like
Yeah.
just like a Vivid Voltage ETB that people were scalping in stores. No, but on both sides, I've seen the way people approach it is not very mature, in my opinion. There's a lot of
Yeah.
personal insults being thrown around, and I feel like if you're against what that person did, you can still have like a polite discussion about it. I don't think you need to put out videos super quickly based on like unconfirmed
Yeah.
information. Basically, is what I think.
Yeah. I agree. I think it really comes down to it, and it's something that kind of sits with me. Is you'll never meet a hater that's doing better than you. I think it's very easy for people to be jealous about people that are more successful than them, that maybe are living the life that they think that they deserve or they should. It comes down to entitlement. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes when you're running a business and making content and traveling the world, and it isn't just as basic as I'll buy a card for this and flip it and it's all fine. So
Yeah,
I think there's a lot more to it.
I would not be able to find a staff member at
No,
Worlds if I went and like negotiate that
I
with
wouldn't
them.
know who to buy from. I wouldn't
Exactly.
know
Like
who to get from, and they
it
certainly wouldn't sell to me.
takes time to build the relationships,
Yeah, and
and
that that that's worth it.
you're taking a risk with the card's
Yeah,
volatility because you're paying a certain price and you don't know if it's going to be that price in 2 days.
no,
So
these
that's my
these
take on.
cards change massive price. I think there there needs to be allowance for the sheer amount of work that's gone involved in these cards, and that needs to be priced into it. The same as you just said, you can go out and buy an ETB in a shop. That's very different than a staff promo at Worlds. That the average collector is not buying a staff world promo. They're just not. You've
I think
got certain
it's
people.
up a bit. but I don't know if it's just on my end. Oh, it's back now. It's back now.
Yeah. Yeah, the average person doesn't want a staffed Worlds promo. Like, the amount of people that kicked up a fuss about it, how many of those truly actually wanted one? Probably not many of them, honestly. But yeah, that is it. That's all we've got time for. Thank you very much for coming on. This obviously was your first time doing anything like this. Hopefully it won't be the last.
No, it won't be. Thanks a lot for having me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, as always, links in the description below. Please check out Thomas's channel. Hit that like, subscribe button. The algorithm loves it. And as always, have a great day.